455A, Sacket Street, Brooklyn, New York. We moved into 455A Sacket Street when I was 14 years old on April 1, 1998. From the moment we arrived, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped the apartment. Despite the excitement of having our first multi-level home, comprising 3 floors, including a basement, the space felt overwhelmingly dark and oppressive. It was as if an unseen presence lingered just behind us, watching our every move. Tragically, within 2 weeks of our arrival, I experienced a horrific violation in my own bedroom at the hands of a man from the neighborhood. An elderly woman who had lived next door for most of her life later informed us that our apartment had a troubling history. She revealed that no tenant had remained for more than a year, and each had faced devastating misfortunes shortly after moving in, continuing until their departure. While we all sensed an eerie presence in the apartment, we initially overlooked any overtly strange occurrences. The environment was uninviting, cold and damp, and despite our efforts to decorate and infuse warmth into the space, nothing seemed to alleviate the discomfort. Additionally, we encountered persistent difficulties in establishing a phone line. Despite having the phone company visit 4 times to address the wiring issues, we were met with silence, no dial tone, not even static, leaving us feeling isolated and disconnected from the outside world. The entire time we were there, weird happenings continued. The ceiling above my brother's bed unexpectedly collapsed. Fortunately, he had just gotten up to use the bathroom, which spared him from injury. In a separate incident, a fire ignited in my room, the cause of which the fire department was unable to determine. Had my friend not stopped by and rung the doorbell, I would have remained asleep. Within 5 minutes of answering the door, my neighbor emerged, shouting that my room was ablaze. I rushed upstairs to find the entire back wall engulfed in flames. In a desperate attempt to extinguish the fire with a blanket, I was unaware that the door had closed behind me. The room quickly darkened, and I began to lose consciousness. Thankfully, my friend arrived just in time to open the door and carry me down the stairs, preventing what could have been a tragic outcome. Following this harrowing experience, my neighbor confided in us about the building's troubled history. He recounted that in the 1930s or 1940s, a fire had claimed the life of a young boy shortly after his family moved in. Additionally, in the 1960s, a couple was murdered by the mob due to a nefarious affair. Unfortunately, no official records exist to corroborate these accounts, as the church's documentation was lost in a fire, leaving us reliant on the memories of those who lived in the area. Other unsettling occurrences also took place. One friend entered my apartment and reported seeing a small boy in charred rags staring at her through the bathroom mirror. She fled in tears and refused to return. Another friend, who had no prior knowledge of our experiences, spent the night and awoke in the middle of the night, convinced she saw a woman walk into my room through the door. These incidents have left us questioning the very nature of our living environment. My brother and I heard the sounds of children crying and laughing coming from downstairs. When we attempted to leave my mother's room, we found ourselves inexplicably locked in for an hour, despite the absence of a physical lock. Meanwhile, my mother was in the basement doing laundry when the lights suddenly went out. In that moment, she felt a cold, scaly hand grip her shoulder. Following that unsettling experience, my father took over the laundry duties. The atmosphere in the house was permeated by strange smells and sounds, accompanied by an overwhelming sense that something or someone did not want us there. It felt as though an ominous presence was looming, suggesting that something bad was about to happen and that we were decidedly unwelcome. A year to the day later, we moved out as soon as we could secure a new apartment. In the aftermath of our departure, we learned more about the unsettling history of our former home. The new tenants who moved in after us attempted to renovate the basement and discovered the remains of a young boy concealed within the walls. They left abruptly one night and never returned. Subsequent occupants experienced similar phenomena, leaving just as mysteriously as the previous tenants. In a curious twist of fate, we later encountered a woman who had visited my mother's workplace. She's a nurse at a doctor's office, due to a nervous condition. My mother noticed that the address on her insurance card didn't match her current residence. The woman explained that she had only lived at 55A Sacket Street for a few months before being compelled to leave due to a series of tragic events, including the death of her mother, all occurring in the first week of her move. When my mother inquired if she had experienced anything unusual, the woman recounted a series of events that mirrored our own, raising the possibility that her condition may have been linked to the unsettling experiences we had all endured. We are all fine now, happy to be out of there, and we've moved on. We still see our old neighbor once in a while, and she always says the best thing we ever did was move out of that God-forsaken house. Needless to say, we agree. We've not been haunted since, and life is good. If there is one thing we learned, I'd say it was to trust our instincts. If you get horrible vibes from a place, don't put it off as folly. It might just save you a whole lot of trouble.
Hello. I've got a strange one tonight. A tale of a ghost in the bathroom. But no screams, no shadows, just toilet paper. I've always loved horror and ghost stories, but I've also maintained a healthy skepticism about real-life supernatural encounters. That was until an incident in 2015 changed my perspective. I was visiting a friend in Portland for Halloween weekend, which, I know, sounds cliché. The house where my friend lived with several roommates was old and creaky, with every floorboard groaning, especially at night. I wish I could tell you exactly how old it was, but I never found out. During my initial tour of the house, I noticed a laundry chute that connected the upstairs bathroom to the basement cellar, where their laundry machines sat alongside a collection of dusty, spooky furniture left behind by previous residents. They never touched the old stuff. It just lingered there, adding to the eerie atmosphere. At the time, I was in my mid-20s and getting ready to head out with my buddy for a Trailblazers versus Suns basketball game, followed by a night at the bars. While I was applying my Halloween makeup in the bathroom mirror, I suddenly felt an odd sensation, a stillness that made my stomach flutter with anxious butterflies. It was that familiar feeling you get when you're playing hide and seek, hiding just out of sight, and you know the seeker is about to find you. I was momentarily frozen in this trance when, out of nowhere, a full roll of toilet paper tipped over from the rest of the pack, rolled onto its side, and began to unravel. There was no draft in that bathroom, no fan, no open window, yet this brand new roll of toilet paper started moving on its own, unraveling down the laundry chute. I stood there, eyeliner in hand, frozen in disbelief as I watched this bizarre scene unfold in the mirror. When the roll finally reached the end, the cardboard inner tube spun around in circles for what felt like an eternity before coming to a stop. I kept standing there for a moment, completely bewildered by what had just happened. Suddenly, my friend knocked on the bathroom door, startling me. "Hey, is everything okay in there?" I stepped out, looking super pale, and he immediately asked, "What's wrong?" I told him about my bizarre experience, and he gave me a funny look. Then he told me that he had just been in the basement when he saw a roll of toilet paper unraveling and folding over itself in a perfect zigzag pattern. Intrigued, he led me downstairs, and sure enough, there it was, the roll of toilet paper neatly folded over itself, with each side perfectly even. He kept insisting, "Seriously, you're telling me you didn't do that?" After a bit of convincing, he finally believed me. He thought I was just messing around with the toilet paper and had come to check on me, assuming I was playing some sort of prank. But neither of us had done anything to provoke this strange occurrence. He was just rummaging through his laundry looking for his son's shirt. I totally get it if you think this is the silliest incident you've ever heard of. Trust me, I know how ridiculous it sounds. But at that moment, it felt bizarre and surreal to both of us. Nowadays, my friend and I just laugh about it. I mean, what kind of quirky little haunting was that? Maybe some playful spirit wanted to pull a classic Halloween prank on us and TP the living. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that some presence was having a little fun with that toilet paper. My friend didn't own the house and had only been living there for a few months, so I never got the chance to ask the main owner if any other strange things had happened there before. But honestly, I don't care what anyone says. I count this as a hilarious paranormal experience, with what my friend and I now call the toilet paper ghost.
Hello. I want to tell you about something I experienced in an apartment complex in Los Angeles County. Something unexplainable. It was around 2005-2006. I'd moved in with friends. The building was unassuming, a typical multi-unit block in Norwalk, near Whittier and Downey. But that night, it felt wrong. One day, we were in the living room when at night, and then click, the kitchen light switched on. But no one there, just an empty hallway. We shrugged it off. Then later, click, the radio turned on. A small FM CD player in the kitchen. It played for minutes until I walked in and switched it off. Silence returned. That seemed fine compared to what came next. A few years later, 2011, 2012, I lived there again, this time by myself, with my brother visiting daily. One morning I woke, everything looked normal, but the room was filled with a white mist. In that fog, a figure, tall, bald, dressed in white. No face, just a blank void. I thought it was my brother at first. He often visited, but it wasn't him. Then there was the little girl, pigtails, an old-fashioned cream dress, back from the early 1900s, walking in the kitchen hallway. She giggled. She moved things around, always just playing. Not malicious, but undeniably present. She never hurt anyone. She was just like a child who refused to leave. Cabinet doors would open, just so, at exactly the same angle, always, every night. I never learned who she was, but her presence, it felt personal, like she was still living in the spaces, the hallways, the kitchen. Over the years, nothing violent happened, no threats, no attacks. Just her presence, as if that apartment was still her place. I tell this not to scare you, but to remind you some presences aren't angry. They're just lost, seeking what once belonged to them. So if you live in a place and you notice the cabinets opening, the lights flickering, listen. Not everyone who lingers here is hostile. Some, like that little girl, just want to be remembered. She was just a child and seemed to enjoy yourself and have fun like a child. She didn't seem malicious at all. Thank you for staying with me tonight. May we honor those who stay beyond our notice and offer them the kindness they never lost.
Hello, maybe it sounds weird, but it's a real story. This story takes us back to late 1996, the year I was born. My parents and I moved into an apartment complex when I was still under a year old. We settled into these budget-friendly apartments while my parents were just starting their careers, juggling the challenges of life with a tiny baby in tow. The move-in process was a bit of a whirlwind, and thankfully my aunt was there to lend a hand. One day while unpacking, they opened the kitchen window, and suddenly, thick, black smoke started pouring into the apartment. At first, they thought someone might be barbecuing nearby, but it turned out there was no grill in sight. My aunt had a gut feeling that something was off, and she urged my parents to consider moving out. Unfortunately, they couldn't afford to at the time. Fast forward a few months, and one night around 2 or 3 a.m., my mom was feeding me in the kitchen. I wasn't usually a fussy baby, but for some reason, I just couldn't stop crying. Worried about waking up the neighbors and my dad, my mom tried to soothe me by rocking me and whispering, "Shh." Just as she had finished saying, "Shh," she heard a voice from the kitchen softly say, "Shh, little one." It definitely wasn't my dad or anyone she recognized. Now, I say all of this as context to the story itself. It all began one night, about 8 or 9 months after my family moved into our new place. At that time, I was just under a year old, still sleeping in a cradle in my parents' room. One night, while my parents were fast asleep, my dad suddenly heard a noise, a bump in the night. In his half-asleep state, he woke up to see what he thought was my mom carrying me and feeding me. Assuming everything was normal, he drifted back to sleep, believing I was being rocked and lulled back to dreamland. The next morning, my mom woke my dad in a bit of a frenzy, asking, "Why is the baby naked?" He looked at me puzzled, because I was fully dressed when he had seen me being rocked. Confused, my dad replied, "What are you talking about? I saw you feeding her last night." To which she responded, "What are you talking about? I was asleep all night. She didn't cry, so I didn't wake up." They decided to check the apartment, and to their surprise, everything was in order. There were no signs of a break-in, nothing missing, and no damage. However, they did find that my clothes had been removed and folded neatly right next to me. Of course, I had no memory of any of this as a baby, but I was all smiles and giggles that morning. Now, my dad is a practical guy, definitely not one to believe in the paranormal. He is a straightforward Capricorn. My mom, on the other hand, has had her fair share of strange encounters, both in America and the Philippines. Her whole side of the family seems to have a sixth sense about them. With all these odd occurrences, my parents started to wonder what was going on in their apartment. It turned out that the entire complex was built over an old graveyard. from the 1950s. Could have been a very sneaky, quiet bandit who broke in with a mission to hold a baby, or a ghost holding a baby. Either way, I feel in some way I was touched by a world I can't explain in layman's terms, and have been interested in being more spiritual and learning how to speak with spirits.
It may seem dramatic, but the events I am about to share are entirely true. Last year, my boyfriend and I embarked on an exciting new chapter by moving into our own apartment in Old Town, an area often regarded as somewhat sketchy. We initially discovered an apartment listed online for $650 a month, which was a competitive price in this area. Unfortunately, that particular unit was no longer available. However, the landlord informed us of another apartment in a fourplex that was also priced at $650. The only caveat was that the previous tenant had passed away. I reassured myself that death is a natural part of life, and we decided to visit the apartment. Upon our initial inspection, it didn't feel particularly unsettling. The unit came equipped with a washer and dryer and was conveniently located near my college campus, so I felt inclined to proceed with the rental. The landlord was legally obligated to disclose information about the previous tenant, a man named Clifford, who had recently passed away. His death was so recent that he had been living his life normally just weeks prior. Clifford had suffered from heart problems, and although the landlord initially stated that he died in the apartment, it was later clarified that he actually passed away in the hospital. Interestingly, the landlord also mentioned that another tenant had died in the same apartment approximately 10 years earlier, though he could not provide any details or a name, as he was too young to have known the previous occupant. One aspect of the apartment that initially concerned me was the carpet, which was in dire need of replacement and bore a stain that, quite frankly, had an uncanny resemblance to a body shape. We decided to place a rug over a persistent stain that no amount of carpet cleaning could remove. Believe me, I tried everything. Despite my efforts, the stain remained. The apartment itself was quite old, and I was generally comfortable with its character. However, I often experienced an unsettling sensation of being watched. I would feel a presence in the corners of the rooms, and while showering, I could sense eyes upon me. My partner, who prefers to dismiss such phenomena, never acknowledged these feelings, as he does not believe in the existence of ghosts or similar entities. Our neighbor in apartment 1 was not particularly pleasant. One day, after my boyfriend and I had been out, she confronted us, claiming we had been excessively loud and banging on the walls the night before. I informed her that we were not even home at that time and that we do not engage in such behavior. Interestingly, I could not hear either of the neighbors on either side of us, despite one of them being a family of 4. I am unsure what she heard, but it certainly was not us. My primary interactions were with the family of 4, although I never learned their names and they never learned mine, but we knew each other's pets' names, and they gave us our kitten, Alfredo, since their cat had kittens. Moving on from that tidbit. The neighbors on the end in apartment 4 moved out and it was remodeled. One night, around midnight, at 12 or so, the police arrived and inquired whether we had noticed any activity in the windows of that apartment. I informed them that no one had been present, aside from the construction crew, who had not visited in several days. The officers mentioned that someone had been reported inside the apartment, yet there were no signs of forced entry. The apartment was securely locked, and given that it was a one-bedroom unit without curtains, it seemed unlikely that anyone could have concealed themselves there. The layout of the apartment was U-shaped, similar to the others in the building. Unfortunately, we never discovered what had transpired, and both the police and my landlord were equally perplexed. Over the course of the following year, we experienced a series of strange phenomena. Items would inexplicably move or disappear, only to reappear on the counter at random times. My partner, who is not inclined to disturb my belongings, did not contribute to these occurrences, and it seemed peculiar for someone to touch the various items that went missing and then reappeared. Additionally, I often felt a presence behind me when I was alone, and I observed my cat exhibiting unusual behavior, such as growling at seemingly empty corners. While these experiences may sound reminiscent of classic ghost stories, I assure you they were genuine occurrences. We ended up moving back with my parents at the end of our lease because of the black mold issue and the fact that it overall was creepy. I often joked about my neighbor Cliff conducting check-ins whenever I felt unwell, but I now question whether it was truly him. I suspect it was actually the other man who passed away in the vicinity. Unfortunately, I couldn't gather much information from my other neighbor, as they were not present during the incident. However, Cliff did share details about the man's passing. I'm relieved to have moved away, yet I have a peculiar feeling that spirits are drawn to me. I frequently dream about loved ones who have passed, including a memorable dream about Clifford. In this dream, I found myself in a living room reminiscent of my own, surrounded by a rocking chair and old photographs. Although I can't recall the specifics of our conversation, the experience felt significant. Additionally, I have had dreams featuring my late cousin, who typically does not say much. In these dreams, he simply embraces me and greets me with a hi. I often remind him that he shouldn't be there, to which he replies, I know. It is certainly unusual to hear a deceased person speak in my dreams. This year has been filled with paranormal experiences. I assure you that these events occurred, even if they may sound like typical ghost stories. The frequency with which such phenomena are mentioned leads me to believe there is some truth to them.
The stairwells of the apartment building feature an intermediate landing between each floor, creating a spiral staircase that ascends in both directions. I find myself seated between the second and third floors, waiting in solitude. My boyfriend Aiden has gone upstairs to complete some chores for his father. He deliberately omits mentioning my presence as he wishes to keep our relationship discreet from his dad. Consequently, I remain hidden just out of sight, ensuring that his father cannot see me if he exits the room on the fourth floor. The atmosphere is eerily quiet, with no sounds or buzzing from the lights, which flicker intermittently, one shade brighter, one shade darker. This subtle variation is only noticeable when one is still, lost in thought while gazing at the red carpet that adorns the stairs. To combat the silence, I put on my headphones and select a familiar song, one I have heard countless times before. Although I dislike being alone, I find solace in the anticipation of Aiden's return, as he is a way of making every moment feel special. While I am not upset, the act of waiting is tedious, and I am acutely aware of my solitude. As the melody envelops me, I glance at a photo of Aiden and me embracing, and a smile crosses my face as I recall the memory. Perhaps we will take more pictures today, allowing me to cherish additional moments when I return home, reflecting on a joyful day spent together. I turn my phone off and on again, seeking the comfort of larger numbers on my lock screen. The time reads 17:33 p.m. I take my backpack off and put it beside me, uncertain of how much longer I will have to wait. Time seems to drag on, prompting me to consider a snack. After enjoying a ham sandwich and some water, my body unexpectedly succumbs to fatigue, and I lean back against the wall of the stairwell. I guess I was more tired than I thought from all the walking today. I fall into a deep, dark, dreamless slumber.
Up here.
I wake up. I hear a faint whispering sound. Due to my poor memory, I have developed a habit of checking whether I am truly awake. I stretch my thumb and index finger apart on my left hand and gently bite the space between them. The sharp pain confirms my consciousness. The motion sensor has turned off the light, but as soon as I move, it flashes back on, momentarily blinding me until I blink away the brightness. Nothing has changed. I am still alone, save for the mysterious voice I heard. Was it merely a figment of my imagination? I must have only dozed off for a few minutes. I reach for my phone, squinting against the harsh light. 22:51 p.m. It appears that I have been asleep for much longer than I initially thought. I check the time repeatedly, 5 or 6 times to ensure I am reading it correctly. I also notice that my phone battery has not drained significantly. Given that I have no service in this location, I'm not surprised that I haven't received any missed calls from my mother, who would likely be concerned. However, I am surprised that I am still here. She probably would have reached out to one of my friends who knew Aiden, asking them to check on me. I rise from my seat, carefully avoiding the pins and needles sensation prickling my legs, and make my way upstairs toward Aiden's door. I do not intend to enter, rather I hope to gain a better signal. If I get close enough, I can connect to his family's Wi-Fi and use it to call my mother for a ride home. As I ascend to what should be the 3rd floor, I notice that my phone still has not improved its reception. It remains at 1 bar, leaving me unable to see if I have received any calls. Strange, I mutter to myself, my voice echoing in the empty space. I ascend to what should be the 4th floor, but to my dismay, it is absent. Instead, I find myself on yet another landing that leads to another staircase. A sinking feeling settles in my stomach as I frantically check my phone, hoping for at least a signal. There is none. Perhaps I miscalculated which floor I was on. With no numbers to guide me, it's possible that if I were between the 1st and 2nd floors, the next landing could indeed be the 4th. Leaning over the staircase railing, I peer into the void between the staircases, straining to see if the ceiling is near or far, a potential indicator of my location. What I discover sends a chill through me. There is no ceiling. There is no end. There is no 4th floor. There is no top. Looking down, I realize there is no ground either, no bottom floor. Panic surges through me as I sprint up the stairs, my heart racing as if it might burst from my chest. I call out for Aiden, my voice hoarse and desperate, until I feel as though I might choke on his name. But it's just me. I am utterly alone in this stairwell, with no one to come to my aid. I come to a halt. Unsure of my current floor, I recognize that running up the stairs in a frenzy is not a viable solution. I take a moment to sit down and assess my options. My bag, containing my remaining food supplies, is approximately 20 floors below. Retrieving it seems prudent if I hope to sustain myself a little longer. I also consider exploring the apartments, the elevator, and of course my phone. When I turn it on, I notice the time, 23:03 p.m. I press the phone icon in the bottom left corner of my screen and attempt to dial 911, but there is no signal. Unlocking my phone, I momentarily gaze at the wallpaper, a cherished photo of Aiden smiling. A wave of regret washes over me. I wish I had kissed him one last time before he went upstairs. I swipe down to check for a Wi-Fi connection, but there is none available. My battery is at 34% and depleting quickly, so I need to conserve power as much as possible. I press the elevator button, but it remains unresponsive. Frustrated, I kick the elevator door and then turn my attention to the door leading to the apartments on this floor. The layout of the building is peculiar. Each floor features a single door on the left that leads to one apartment on the left and one on the right. Unlike other buildings that typically have 2 doors on each side, this one is designed differently for reasons unknown to me. I push the door open, but neither apartment responds to my attempts to enter. I knock and shout for help, straining my voice, but I am met with an unsettling silence. No one answers my calls. The stillness serves as the stark reminder of my isolation. I am utterly alone. Turning my back to the door, I slide down to the floor, overwhelmed with a wave of emotion. I break down, tears streaming down my face. I feel sadness, fear, anger, and confusion all swirling within me as I grapple with the uncertainty of my situation. I cry until exhaustion takes over, and I find myself drifting off. Blinking away the tears, I check my phone. It reads 00:02 a.m. Of course, my phone battery is at 28%. I feel overwhelmed and begin to cry. In a moment of frustration, I stand and strike the door with all my strength. The wood remains intact, but my skin does not. The knuckle of my middle finger is red and bleeding, while my ring finger is swollen and inflamed. The others show only slight redness. I lean against the door, tears streaming down my face, as I gaze at my injured knuckles. I remain in this position for what feels like an eternity, until something shifts in the atmosphere. The motion sensor light turns off. I rise and push through the door into the stairwell. I had hoped that opening the door would reactivate the motion sensor, but it remains dark. I stand in the shadows, my face streaked with tears and mucus, as my blood drips onto the carpet, merging with the fibers beneath me. My stomach growls. I'm hungry. I remember that there is food in my bag. I reach for my backpack, but my hand grasps only air. It's still down there, approximately 20 floors below. I turn on the flashlight feature of my phone and begin my descent down the stairs. I am not running, so it takes significantly longer to reach the bottom than it did to ascend. Without a clear indication of my current floor, I can only hope to find my backpack and consider going down instead of up. As I descend 5 floors, a sound suddenly halts me. Up here. It is the same voice that woke me up when I dozed off. Maybe it's the thing that took me. "Hello?" I shout while looking up. Nobody responds. I peer my head over the railing and look up and see nothing. In a moment of desperation, I illuminated the space with my phone's flashlight. To my horror, I caught sight of a pair of long, oily black fingers retreating from the stairwell railing just 1 floor above me. Panic surged through me as I quickly withdrew and descended the stairs as quietly as possible. My heart raced. I had made too much noise, and whatever lurked above was now aware of my presence. I needed to reach my backpack and find a place to hide until the lights returned, if they ever did. I had descended 15 floors in mere minutes, and I hoped I was close to my belongings. As I turned the corner, relief washed over me when I spotted my bag. However, that relief was short-lived. A grotesque figure was hunched over it, rummaging through the contents. Its limbs were long, thin, and veiny, supporting a wiry frame as it crawled on all 4s. The creature had its head buried deep in my bag, devouring my clothes, my water bottle, my food. I froze in horror as I shone my light on it. The creature reacted instantly, pulling away into the shadows, its head emerging to reveal a gaping maw filled with an endless spiral of teeth. The sight was surreal, as if the very laws of biology had been defied. It screeched at me, then scurried down the stairs with alarming speed, using the walls and floor like a spider. I stood paralyzed, my scream echoing in the empty space. My food is gone. That thing is below me, Something else is above me. I don't know what to do. I'm hiding in the door on that very floor. I don't know what else has happened since the lights have turned on and off. Multiple times, I've seen shadows and eyes peering in at me when the lights were off, but I'm not going to move, even when they're on. There's nowhere to run to.